I'd like to begin today by reading a very short, anonymous poem about leaving home. It's written on a postcard from two parents to their daughter, and in the address section is written, "The Great Unknown, Far, Far Away." And the poem reads as follows: "Dearest daughter, be careful. We trust you. We love you, Mom and Dad." Dearest daughter, be careful. We trust you. We love you, Mom and Dad. In those simple words is captured a whole range of thoughts and sentiments, a deep sense of love and care that has been nurtured and treasured over the daughter's lifetime, from her conception through her childhood, teens, and into adulthood. Dearest daughter, we love you. A sense of anxiety and worry over what could potentially go wrong. Be careful. The sense that she has grown and matured and has developed the skills to make it on her own. We trust you. And reading between the lines, the underlying sense of sadness that inevitably comes with having to let go in that way, expressed in the address, the great unknown, far, far away. Dearest daughter, be careful. We trust you. We love you, Mom and Dad. Today we continue our preaching series on the return of the prodigal son, a reflection on the parable that Jesus tells in Luke 15, but also a reflection on a book written by Henri Nouwen, reflecting on Rembrandt's painting by the same name. As Henri Nouwen reflects on the full title of Rembrandt's painting, The Return of the Prodigal Son, he writes that implicit in the return is a leaving. Returning is a homecoming only after a home leaving, a coming back after having gone away. He writes, the father who welcomes his son home is so glad because this son was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found. The immense joy in welcoming back the lost son hides the immense sorrow that has gone before. He writes that only when we have the courage to explore in depth what it means to leave home can we come to a true understanding of what it means to return. In Rembrandt's painting of the prodigal son, the sorrow and the pain of leaving is depicted most profoundly in the rags of the son as he returns. But the depth of pain and sorrow are not just the son's, who has discovered the harshness of life outside of his father's embrace. The sorrow is indeed also the sorrow and the anguish of the father, who has watched his beloved younger son leaving home not as a means of growing to full adult maturity, but rather with a desire to avoid taking responsibility. With sorrow in his heart, the father has had to watch the son leave, knowing that disaster is surely awaiting the son, but it is the only way he will ultimately grow. Knowing also that if he tried to prevent his son from leaving, he would lose his son's love anyway. For if you love someone, you will in the end need to set them free. Like Jesus, who doesn't run after the rich young man, the father in the parable does not run after the son. For the son needs to make the necessary mistakes that will hopefully in the end lead him back home. Henri Nouwen tells how Kenneth Bailey offers a penetrating explanation of the gravity of the son's leaving. He quotes Kenneth Bailey, who writes, "For over 15 years I've been asking people of all walks of life, from Morocco to India, from Turkey to the Sudan, about the implications of a son's request for his inheritance while his father is still living. And the answer has always been emphatically the same. The conversation runs as follows. Has anyone ever made such a request in your village? Never. Could anyone ever make such a request? Impossible. If anyone did, what would happen? His father would beat him, of course. Why? The request means he wants his father to die. Father, I cannot wait for you to die, is the implication of the son's request. As Timothy Keller writes, the request shows that the younger son loves his father's money more than he loves his father. It is the father's stuff that he wants, not his father's love. The son's leaving is therefore more than just an offense to the father. It is a heartless rejection of the home in which the son was born and nurtured, and a break from the whole tradition upheld by the larger community of which he was a part. One could say it's an act of profound self-centeredness and a betrayal of the treasured values of family and community that have nurtured and formed him, as he chooses to dispose of his father's assets and to leave for a distant country, rather than to give back out of gratitude for all that he has received in life. But this parable is not just about leaving home in a literal sense. It's meant to be read as a parable, a metaphor, for those times when we leave the inner home of our spiritual life. And so Henri Nouwen writes that leaving home is much more than an historical event bound in time and space. Rather, it is a denial of the spiritual reality that I belong to God. That even amidst the mountains and valleys of life, God holds me safe in an eternal embrace, that I am indeed carved in the palms of God's hands and hidden in their shadows. Leaving home means ignoring the truth that God has fashioned me in secret, molded me in the depths of the earth, knitted me together in my mother's womb. Leaving home is living as though I do not yet have a home, and so must look far and wide to find one, when all along I already have a home in God's gentle embrace. Henri Nouwen goes on, he says, home is the center of my being, where I can hear that voice that says, you are my beloved, on you my favor rests. To leave home for a distant country, as the prodigal son does, is to cease to hear that voice of God that whispers our name and calls us the beloved, and in its place it is to seek other ways to fill the void that is left. Leaving home means seeking in other things and in other people a depth of satisfaction, contentment, and love that only the divine can bring. To leave home in a spiritual sense is to cease finding our fulfillment in things that are of eternal and enduring value, and to put our hope and our trust in things that are impermanent, passing, and of fleeting value. By contrast, if we find ourselves deeply rooted in the world of the Spirit, one could say, grounded in a sense of the eternal, then it is possible to appreciate and to enjoy the fleeting joys of life because we are rooted in something that is deeper. Is that perhaps what it might mean to be in this world but not of this world? But when we fail to root ourselves in our true inner home of the Spirit, then chasing after the fleeting joys of life becomes like chasing after the wind, as we read in Ecclesiastes. It's a recipe for desperate, futile, empty, and addictive living, as the younger son very quickly discovers as he finds himself hitting rock bottom, feeding pigs, and longing to eat their food. We can only appreciate the joys of our outward senses in the material world when we are rooted in the more enduring and deeper joy of the Spirit, our true home. As I suggested earlier, the fatal mistake of the younger son in the parable is that he wanted to enjoy only the good things of life. Leaving home was an exercise in avoidance. He was trying to avoid growing up, trying to avoid the pain and the difficulties of life as an adult, and so soon he finds himself far away from his father's love, living alone in a pigsty in a distant country. And there he discovers for himself that pain and struggle cannot in the end be avoided in life. When we live our lives trying to avoid the pain, the struggles, and the responsibilities of life, we end up in even greater pain and suffering than we would have been in the first place. We all find ourselves, from time to time, living in metaphorical distant countries, away from the love of the Father. To live in a distant country is a metaphor for the dead ends, where we have searched for love, affirmation, value, and satisfaction, but only found emptiness, broken promises, and constantly shifting sands. Henri Nouwen writes, "I am the prodigal son. Every time I have searched for unconditional love where it cannot be found. Why do I keep ignoring the place of true love and persist in looking for it elsewhere? Why do I keep leaving home, where I am called a child of God, the beloved of my Father?" Henri Nouwen writes that it is not very hard to know when we are being dragged into a distant country, away from our true spiritual home within. Fear, anger, resentment, greed, anxiety, jealousy, a sense of barrenness and emptiness are all the signs that we have left home. Perhaps daydreaming about becoming rich, powerful, and famous, and in the process disconnected from the inner voice of love that is already whispering, "You are my beloved, on whom my favor rests." Amen.